Are you struggling to restrict draggable elements to a specific area on your web page? It can be frustrating when things don't work as expected. But don't worry, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to tackle how to restrict dropping draggable elements into a predefined div element using interact.js. I totally understand how annoying it is when you think you've set everything up correctly, only to find out that it doesn't work. You're not alone in this. Many developers face similar challenges when working with draggable elements. Let's dive into the specific question at hand. One user asked, how can I restrict dropping draggable objects inside a predefined div so that dropping outside of it is disabled? They mentioned using interact.js, but ran into issues with their current setup. Sound familiar? Let's explore this together. So, what could be going wrong? The restriction settings in interact.js can be tricky. It's essential to ensure that the restriction is correctly defined and that the draggable elements are properly configured to recognize the drop zone. And stick around. I have a valuable tip at the end that will help you avoid these issues in the future. To restrict dropping draggable elements into a predefined div, the user should first ensure that the restriction settings are correctly configured in the interact.js library. Next, the user needs to ensure that the drop zone is properly set up to accept draggable elements. This involves defining the drop zone with the appropriate event listeners. After setting up the drop zone, the user should verify that the draggable elements are correctly configured to interact with the drop zone. This includes ensuring that the draggable elements have the correct class. Finally, the user should test the functionality by dragging the elements and attempting to drop them inside the drop zone. They should observe that dropping outside the drop zone is disabled. Fun fact, did you know that the first drag and drop interfaces were developed in the 1970s? We've come a long way since then, but the basics still apply. Now, let's look at the answers provided by other users. An alternative approach to restrict draggable elements to a drop zone involves using restriction modifiers. This user suggests implementing the interact.js library's restrict_rect modifier. By setting the restriction to the drop zone element, you can ensure that draggable items stay within the defined area. The code includes event listeners for starting and moving the drag, allowing for cloning of elements and updating their positions dynamically. Now, let's see a response from a different user. An alternative solution provided by another user suggests a simple change. Instead of using restriction with document.getElementById, they recommend using restriction with the class selector drop zone. This adjustment ensures that the draggable elements are properly restricted to the designated drop zone. Here's the tip I promised. Always test your draggable and drop zone setup in different browsers. Sometimes what works in one browser may not work in another. And there you have it. With these steps, you should be able to restrict dropping draggable elements into your predefined div successfully. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe for more tips and tricks on web development.